Hello everyone. I invite you to continue listening to the horror story, which is thrilling and captivating. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you everyone. Story: The abandoned Saint Lazare prison in France and the frightening things. The Hollow of Saint Lazare. The abandoned Saint Lazare prison loomed on the outskirts of a forgotten French village, its skeletal remains clawing at the gray sky like the ribs of some long-dead beast. Once a notorious stronghold in the 18th century, it had housed murderers, thieves, and revolutionaries, men and women whose screams, it was said, still lingered in the damp stone walls. By 2025, it had been left to rot for over a century, its iron gates rusted shut, its windows hollowed out like empty eyes. Locals avoided it, whispering of shadows that moved without owners and voices that called from the darkness. But to me, Elise Moreau, a journalist with a taste for the macabre, it was a magnet. I'd heard the rumors. Disappearances tied to the prison, hikers vanishing in the nearby woods, and a groundskeeper who'd gone mad in the 1970s after claiming he'd seen prisoners still locked in their cells. My editor at Le Fantôme, a niche magazine for the strange and unexplained, had greenlit my pitch for a feature. "Get me something chilling," he'd said, "but don't get yourself killed." I'd laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. It was March 2nd, 2025, when I arrived at the village of Montclair, a cluster of crumbling stone houses 30 kilometers from the prison. The air was damp, heavy with the promise of rain, and the villagers eyed me with suspicion as I asked about Saint Lazare. An old woman at the bakery, her hands trembling as she handed me a baguette, muttered, "That place is cursed. The dead don't rest there." A man at the tavern, nursing a glass of red wine, told me he'd heard footsteps echoing from the prison at night, footsteps that stopped abruptly, as if whoever made them had vanished mid-stride. I scribbled it all down, my excitement mounting. This was going to be one hell of a story. The next morning, I drove my rented Peugeot down a winding dirt road toward the prison. The forest around it was dense, the trees gnarled and leafless despite the early spring. My GPS lost signal a kilometer out, leaving me to navigate by instinct. When the prison finally came into view, my breath caught. It was worse than the photos. A sprawling, decaying fortress of blackened stone, its towers jagged and broken. The outer wall had collapsed in places, revealing a courtyard choked with weeds. The main gate hung ajar, its iron bars twisted as if something had forced its way out or in. I parked and grabbed my gear, a flashlight, a recorder, my camera, and a notebook. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and a faint smell of rot hung around me as I stepped through the gate. The courtyard was silent except for the crunch of gravel under my boots. Cells lined the perimeter, their doors rusted shut or missing entirely. Broken chains dangled from a gallows in the center, swaying slightly though there was no wind. I snapped a few photos, my heart thudding with a mix of fear and adrenaline. The main building's entrance was a cavernous archway, its wooden doors long since rotted away. Inside, the darkness swallowed the daylight, my flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating peeling walls stained with moss and something darker blood. Maybe, or just my imagination. The air was thick with dust, and every step echoed like a gunshot. I turned on my recorder and whispered, "March 3rd, 2025, Elise Moreau entering Saint Lazare prison. The atmosphere is oppressive. I can feel it pressing on me." I explored the ground floor first. A warren of cells, some with rusted bars still intact, others with graffiti scratched into the stone. Names, dates, pleas for mercy. One cell had a single word carved deep into the wall. "Fuis," flee. I shivered but pressed on, climbing a spiraling staircase to the upper levels. The higher I went, the colder it got, and a faint sound began to creep into the silence. A low, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails on stone. On the third floor, I found the warden's office, its door hanging off its hinges. Inside was a desk, a cracked chair, and a row of shelves collapsed under the weight of decayed ledgers. I picked one up, its pages brittle and yellowed. The ink was faded, but I could make out names and dates prisoners logged from 1762 to 1799, when the prison was shuttered during the Revolution. One entry caught my eye. Asterisk Jean-Paul Duval, sentenced to life for treason. Executed 1798. Note, refused to die. Asterisk, I frowned. Refused to die. Typo, maybe, or a grim joke. I photographed it and moved on. The tapping grew louder as I descended to the basement, a labyrinth of tunnels and solitary confinement cells. The air down here was wet, the walls slick with slime. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath, smacking it against my palm until it steadied. The beam landed on a cell door unlike the other's solid iron. No bars, no window, bolted shut with a massive padlock. The tapping was coming from inside. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Then, a sound, a low, guttural moan, like an animal in pain. My skin prickled. I backed away, clutching my recorder. "There's something here," I whispered into it. "Something alive." That's when the lights went out. Not just my flashlight, the world itself seemed to dim. A blackness deeper than night swallowed me, and a cold wind rushed through the tunnel, carrying whispers I couldn't understand. I fumbled for my phone, its screen barely piercing the dark. The battery was at 5%, though it had been full an hour ago. Panic clawed at me as I stumbled back toward the stairs, the whispers growing louder, angrier. Asterisk, "Fweeze, fweeze, fweeze." Asterisk. I made it to the ground floor, gasping only to find the courtyard changed. The gallows were gone, replaced by a crowd of shadows, dozens of them. Humanoid but wrong, their edges blurred, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. They didn't move, just watched me, their presence a weight on my chest. I ran for the gate, my boots slipping on the gravel, and threw myself into the car. The engine sputtered but started, and I tore down the road, the prison shrinking in my rearview mirror. Back at the village inn, I locked myself in my room and listened to the recorder. My voice was there, shaky but clear until the basement. After something alive, there was a burst of static, then a voice not mine, low, rasping, speaking French. Asterisk, "To any per pop harder." Asterisk, "You cannot leave." My hands shook as I played it again and again, the words searing into my brain. Sleep didn't come that night. Every creak of the old inn sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a whisper. At dawn, I packed my things, determined to leave Montclair and its cursed prison behind. But when I reached the car, the tires were slashed clean, deliberate cuts. The innkeeper, a wiry man with sunken eyes, shrugged when I asked who might have done it. "The forest doesn't like strangers," he said, and walked away. I had no choice but to stay another day, waiting for a tow truck that never arrived. Instead, I dug into the prison's history, using the inn's patchy Wi-Fi to search old records. St. Lazare had been a brutal place, its warden a sadist named Claude Renaud who tortured prisoners for sport. Jean-Paul Duval, the man who refused to die, had been his favorite target, flayed, starved, and finally hanged, though the ledger's odd note stuck with me. Locals claimed Renaud's cruelty had tainted the prison, trapping the souls of the dead within its walls. A 1973 article mentioned the groundskeeper's breakdown. He'd seen Duval, still hanging from the gallows, his body twitching as if alive. By nightfall, I was a wreck, jumping at shadows. I decided to leave on foot at first light, car or no car. But around midnight, the tapping started again right outside my window. I yanked the curtains back and saw nothing but darkness. Yet the sound persisted, relentless. Then, a figure appeared in the glass's reflection, not outside, but behind me. Tall, emaciated, with hollow eyes and a noose around its neck. I spun around, but the room was empty. The tapping stopped, replaced by that same rasping voice from the recorder. Asterisk, to an per pop harder. Asterisk. I fled the inn, running blindly into the night, my flashlight bouncing off trees as I stumbled toward the main road. The forest was alive with sound, branches snapping, whispers circling me, footsteps matching mine. I don't know how long I ran before I tripped, sprawling into the dirt. My flashlight rolled away, its beam landing on a signpost. St. Lazare, 1 km. I'd gone the wrong way. The prison loomed ahead, its silhouette black against the moonless sky. The gate was open wider now, inviting me back. I wanted to scream, to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't move. A scarier story. The Hound of St. Lazare. The road to St. Lazare prison was a ribbon of mud and shadow winding through a skeletal forest that seemed to claw at the sky. It was March 2025, and I, Mark Lefebvre, a private investigator with a knack for lost causes, had come to this forsaken corner of France with one companion, my dog Bruno. A wiry, black-and-tan mutt with sharp ears and sharper instincts. He'd been my shadow for 6 years, ever since I pulled him from a ditch during a rainstorm. Now, he sat in the passenger seat of my battered Citroën, his nose pressed to the window, growling low as the prison's silhouette emerged from the fog. St. Lazare had been abandoned since the French Revolution, a hulking relic of stone and iron that once caged the worst of humanity: murderers, traitors, and madmen. Its reputation had outlived its walls. Locals in Montclair, the nearest village, spoke of it in hushed tones, claiming it devoured anyone foolish enough to cross its threshold. I wasn't here for ghost stories, though. I'd been hired by a wealthy Parisian, Madame Claire Dubois, to find her missing son, Julien. He'd vanished 3 weeks ago after telling friends he was headed to St. Lazare to face the legends. His last text, sent from these woods, read, "The barking won't stop." Madame Dubois had offered me 10,000 euros to bring him back, dead or alive. I didn't care about the prison's past, only the paycheck. But as I parked near the rusted gate, Bruno's growls deepened, his hackles rising. "Easy, boy," I muttered, clipping a flashlight to my belt and grabbing my satchel. Inside were the essentials: a Glock 19, a knife, a first aid kit, and Julian's photo, a lanky 20-year-old with dark hair and a cocky grin. Bruno hopped out after me, sticking close as we approached the gate. The prison was a ruin, its outer wall crumbling, its towers jagged like broken teeth. The gate hung ajar, creaking in the windless air. Beyond it, a courtyard stretched out, choked with weeds and littered with shattered stone. Cells gaped open along the perimeter, their bars twisted or gone entirely. A gibbet stood in the center, its noose long rotted away, but the wood was stained dark, as if blood had soaked into it over centuries. Bruno whimpered, his tail low, and I couldn't blame him. The place reeked of decay, wet earth, and something sharper, like meat left to spoil. "Julian," I called, my voice echoing off the walls. No answer, just the faint drip of water somewhere deep inside. Bruno sniffed the ground, then bolted toward the main building, a cavernous maw of an entrance with no doors. "Bruno, wait," I hissed, chasing after him. He stopped at the threshold, ears pricked, staring into the dark. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam slicing through the gloom. The air inside was cold, heavy with dust and mildew. Footprints marked the floor, human, recent, leading deeper in. Julian's, maybe? We followed them, Bruno ahead, me behind with my hand on the Glock. The ground floor was a maze of cells and corridors, the walls scarred with scratches and faded graffiti. One read "Libera's noose free us" in jagged letters. The footprints led to a stairwell, its steps worn smooth by time. Bruno hesitated, whining, but I nudged him forward. "Come on, we've got a job to do." He obeyed, though his eyes darted to every shadow. The second floor was worse. The air grew colder, the silence thicker, broken only by a faint sound of distant, rhythmic barking. Bruno froze, his ears twitching. "You hear that too, huh?" I said, my breath fogging in the beam of light. It wasn't him barking, it was something else, something far off but getting closer. The footprints ended at a cell, its door ajar. Inside was a backpack, torn open, spilling energy bars and a cracked phone. I recognized it from Madame Dubois's description, Julian's. The phone screen was dead, but a bloody smudge marked the edge. My stomach tightened. "Julian!" I shouted again. The barking stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl not Bruno's. He bared his teeth, backing into me, his fur bristling. I swung the flashlight around, but the corridor was empty. Then a shadow flickered at the far end, tall, hunched, gone in an instant. "Who's there?" I demanded, drawing the Glock. No response, just the echo of my voice and Bruno's snarls. We descended to the basement, the barking resuming, louder now, reverberating through the tunnels. The walls down here wept with moisture, the air thick with the stench of rot. Bruno tugged at his leash, pulling me toward a heavy iron door, its surface pitted with rust but intact, locked with a chain thick as my wrist. The barking came from behind it, sharp and frantic, like a dog trapped and desperate. I yanked at the chain, but it held firm. "Julian, you in there?" I called. The barking cut off, and a voice answered, faint, ragged, human. "Help, please." "Hold on." I holstered the Glock and dug out my knife, prying at the chain's links. Bruno pawed at the door, whining, his nails scraping the iron. The voice came again, weaker. "It's coming." A chill ran through me. I worked faster, the chain finally giving way with a screech. The door swung open, revealing a black void. My flashlight barely penetrated it, the beam swallowed by an unnatural darkness. Bruno lunged forward, and I grabbed his collar just in time. "No, stay." The barking erupted again, not from the void, but behind us. I spun, light flashing across the tunnel. At the far end stood a dog or something like one. It was massive, its fur matted and black, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow. Its jaws hung open, dripping with saliva, and its bark was a distorted roar, shaking the walls. Bruno snarled, straining against me, but I dragged him back, kicking the door shut. The chain was useless now, and the thing was closing in, its claws clicking on the stone. "Run!" I shouted, shoving Bruno ahead as we bolted up the stairs. The creature's growls chased us, its bulk slamming into walls as it pursued. We burst into the courtyard, the night sky a dull gray above. The shadows here were different, moving, shifting, forming shapes that weren't quite human. Men in tattered uniforms, women with hollow faces, all watching us with eyeless stares. The dog thing emerged from the entrance, its form rippling, growing larger, its limbs stretching unnaturally. I fired the Glock, 3 shots into its chest. It staggered but didn't fall, its flesh knitting back together as black ooze seeped from the wounds. "What the hell are you?" I yelled, backing toward the gate. Bruno barked furiously, darting between me and the thing, buying me seconds. The shadows closed in, their hands brushing my skin cold, clammy. "Real?" One whispered, "*Il revient toujours. He always returns." We reached the gate, but the Citron wouldn't start. The battery was dead, though I checked it that morning. The creature lunged, and I tackled Bruno out of the way, its claws raking my arm. Paint seared through me, blood soaking my sleeve. I scrambled up, dragging Bruno into the woods, the prison's silhouette fading behind us. The barking followed, relentless, joined by the whispers of the dead. Hours later, we stumbled into Montclair, battered and bleeding. The villagers stared but didn't approach. An old man at the tavern, his hands shaking, muttered, "You've seen the hound." He told me the story over a glass of brandy I didn't want. St. Lazare's warden, Claude Renaud, had kept a monstrous dog, a beast he'd starved and beaten into a killer. When the prison fell in 1799, the prisoners turned on Renaud, feeding him to the hound. But it didn't die, couldn't die. It roamed the ruins, guarding the souls trapped there, claiming any who dared enter. "And Julian?" I asked, my voice hoarse. The old man shook his head. "If the hound got him, he's gone. Or worse." I didn't sleep that night. Bruno stayed close, his eyes fixed on the window, growling at nothing or something I couldn't see. At dawn, I called Madame Dubois, told her Julian was lost, and wired back half her deposit. She screamed at me, but I hung up. I couldn't go back. Not for money, not for anything. But the barking didn't stop. It followed us to Paris, faint at first, a whisper in the night. Bruno hears it too. He paces, he whines, he stares into corners. Last night, I saw it in the alley below my apartment, the hound, its yellow eyes burning, its jaws wide. The shadows were with it, their whispers clearer now. Asterisk 2es a Louis. Asterisk you're his. Bruno's growling beside me as I write this. The barking's closer, shaking the walls. I don't know if it's after me, or him. But I know one thing, Saint-Lazare doesn't let go. And neither does its hound.